Many students are confused about how to organize a formal essay and how to satisfy the instructor's writing assignment. This video will address both of these concerns. I'll begin by explaining what the structure of an essay is, because in fact it can mean two things. Then I will discuss the various types or genres of essays that you might be asked by your teacher to write. Let's get started. First, it's important to know that all formal essays have the same basic format or structure. They begin with an introduction, which comprises between 5 and 20% of the essay. This is followed by the body of the essay, which is the bulk of it, 65 to 90%. And finally, the conclusion, which is generally around 5 to 15% of the essay. In the introduction, you introduce your topic to the reader and tell them what you intend to say or write. Then, in the body, you discuss in more detail that which you mentioned in the introduction. And at the end, in the conclusion, you offer some final thoughts on the topic and often review the main ideas discussed throughout. Another common structural feature of formal or academic essays is the paragraph. Regardless of the genre, your essay will be divided into paragraphs. And if the essay is long enough, there might be sections consisting of several paragraphs. At any rate, each paragraph consists, on average, of 4 to 6 sentences and generally makes 1 point. For example, volcanoes attract tourists to local cities. Here, the point is volcanoes attract tourists. It is ill-advised to make more than one main point per paragraph. For example, the first sentence of this paragraph makes 2 points. Volcanoes attract tourists and create revenue for local communities. This is difficult to pull off or execute because you have to discuss 2 points equally in just 4 to 6 sentences and provide enough information to make it interesting and convincing. Unless you don't have much to say about either point, it's better to divide these points into 2 paragraphs. So, for example, the first paragraph might be volcanoes attract tourists to local cities, followed by the second paragraph, volcanoes create much needed revenue for local communities. I've just discussed the basic format or structure of the essay, but you should know that when I mention essay structure, it can also mean how you order your ideas. We will talk about this type of essay structure, how to order your ideas, a bit later in the series. Now, let's turn to the various types of essays that you might be asked to write. For this video, I'm going to take a topic that we mentioned in the previous video, which, if you haven't seen yet, you can click the link in the corner or in the caption below this video. The topic is the effects of volcanoes on nearby communities. All examples in this video will be based on this essay topic. So now that we've selected our topic, we now need to understand the genre or type of essay that we're going to be asked to write. In high school, and for some assignments in university, the most common form of essay is the informative or report. This is generally the easiest essay to write because it is structurally unsophisticated, not very difficult. What I mean by that is you write an informative essay in a very natural way, which requires more logic than analysis. Often you write the essay in a chronological manner, as if you were telling a story. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. Time orders your paper. So, for the topic, the impact of volcanoes on local communities, we might be looking at one volcano and how it impacted one local town. For example, section 1 or paragraph 1 might be focused on the Kilauea volcano eruption in 2018. This will be followed by section 2, the negative economic impact on the island in the subsequent 2 years. Finally, section 3 might be devoted to the gradual economic recovery as tourists return to the area. So we see here that time very conveniently orders or provides structure for the essay. By the way, if your instructor doesn't specify the type of essay to write, then you can assume that it's an informative essay or report, and you can adopt the format that I've suggested above. Informative essays, as well as most news articles or reports, often answer the most basic human question: what happened? The next most popular question we as people like to ask is, how did it happen? To answer this question, cause and effect essays are most apt. How did the volcano destroy the economy? How does it, the volcano, later provide benefits to the community? These are two questions will lead us to answers on why or how it happened. Like cause and effect essays, for and against essays have their structure built into the genre. There are two basic ways to write this essay. We can have a section 1 devoted to for reasons volcanoes are good for the economy, followed by section 2 of the essay against, that is, reasons they damage it. Or you can place for and against within each paragraph according to themes. For example, section 1 or paragraph 1 might be, hotels reveal most clearly the positive and negative consequences of volcanoes. So the pros are the positive consequences and the against are the negative ones. Section 2 might look like this. Industry derives natural resources from the area, but is hurt by it as well when lava is emitted. Here, the for are the natural resources. The against is the damage wrought by the lava. Perhaps the most challenging essay to write is the argumentative one, assuming you don't just adopt someone else's argument as your own. Because it follows no clear pattern. It depends on your main thesis or idea and the supporting arguments or evidence that you use. This is one reason why many teachers prefer using this essay style to assess students. You can see not only a student's writing ability, but as well their logic and analysis. By the way, in this writing series, we will be using the argumentative essay as our model. Here's an example of an outline of an argumentative essay. We might begin with the main idea, which we find in the introduction. Volcanoes have a net positive impact on local communities. This is your main idea, and you will seek to prove this or convince the reader that this is so by the supporting evidence that you will discuss in the body of the essay. So your first supporting idea might be, volcanoes always attract extreme sportsmen and women and thrill seekers. In other words, volcanoes, whether active or not, always attract tourists. This supports the thesis of volcanoes as having a positive impact on communities. Your second idea might be the following. International news media report on active volcanoes and, in the process, provide generous and free advertising of the area. Another positive effect of volcanoes: free advertising for potential tourists. This concludes our discussion of the types of essays that you might be asked to write. There are a few others, but the ones I've discussed in this video are perhaps the most common. If you missed part 1 of the series on how to find an interesting topic, hit the link above or find it in the caption below. And if you are still watching this video, then subscribe to my channel turn on the notifications, and tell your friends about this writing series. See you next week for the next academic writing segment on thesis statements or main ideas within the introduction. Thanks for watching.